the hardest thing to do is nothing. So if you're the kind of person that has difficulty being in the middle, dealing with uncertainty, dealing with the lack of a final answer, then this could be a good video for you. So whenever something is uncertain or kind of nebulous or foggy, it can create a type of anxiety. And from that anxiety, we want to take some kind of action to move this kind of foggy state to something that's more clear or defined. But there's two things here. So the first is sometimes we might take an action that would just move it from foggy to, let's say, a negative outcome when there could have been a positive outcome. And then the second thing could be sometimes you take an action and it just, nothing happened. It was completely pointless. So we probably want to avoid that as well. So we're going to be talking about some of these concepts, and particularly we're going to be talking about something called the illusion of action. What is the illusion of action? So the illusion of action is kind of this belief that when you're faced with a difficult situation, that you believe that it's your actions that are going to make the outcome better. But sometimes the best thing you can do is just to leave well enough alone. So let's say that you had a relationship, or you had a close friend and you had this heated argument, and maybe you were worried because they went silent. So you're thinking, well, I gotta send them a long text, and I gotta let them know how I feel, and I gotta keep checking on them to see if they're okay. But maybe you should just leave this person alone, and after you leave them alone for some time, they might cool down, and things can re-engage. Or sometimes you're at work and you're thinking, well, I had to deliver this project and I delivered this other project, and I got to keep working, and I got to keep working long hours and delivering all the time. And sometimes you work on extra on a project, but because you didn't align with your team, with your manager, with the strategy, well, you worked on this project and it wasn't even used. So all this extra action was not really necessary, and you could have just took some time off. So there's all these different areas in life in which we feel that we need to do something, but when it's not really aligned in a certain way, it's not going to help us at all, and sometimes it might make it worse. So that is the illusion of action. Actions are only valid as a response. So consider the analogy of the game of tennis, in which one person hits a ball over the net, and then the second person responds with the action of hitting the ball back over the net. Now, the problem occurs when the second person tries to hit a ball back over the net that has not yet been served. This is not a two-way game. So if you think about, let's say, in the modern day, let's talk about like texting. So somebody texts you, you text them back, and then you send them another text, and then you send them another text. This is not kind of back and forth. This is not a proper response. This is like over-responding, right? So dynamics happen when there's an action and then there's a reaction. There's a balance there. Now, every action has to take place within a given context. So you can take an action over here and it would have a good result over here, but you could take the same action in a different place, in a different time, and then that action would have a bad outcome or have no outcome at all. So if you've ever seen the classic movie Back to the Future, so Marty McFly, he gets on the stage, back in 1955, he traveled back in time, and he pulls out his guitar and he plays this wailing guitar solo, right? And the problem with this guitar solo is that it's from the future, so nobody in the room has ever heard anything quite like this. So instead of thunderous applause, which he was expecting, there's pretty much a stunned silence. Nobody knows how to respond. It seems like this alien music. They're like, what is this? So he took the action. He took a bold action, and he did a pretty good job playing that solo actually. But it was the wrong audience, so they didn't know how to respond. So it was just silence, right? So how many times in your life have you taken some bold action and you did it in the wrong place or the wrong audience, or maybe the context is just not right. It's just not the right time to do it at the right place. Now this action just has no fruit, and it was a great action. It was a great performance, but nobody was watching. Hopefully somebody's watching this YouTube, right? And that's what happens in life, is that you have to take the action as a response to what's going on in the current context of current climate. So in our previous videos, we mentioned how the world is always changing. There's the evolution of time, bringing different time periods, different eras. And as those eras are changing, as the wheel is turning, certain actions become more effective than others. And if you're able to wait for that right time and where the action aligns with the environment, then the action is going to have a maximum effect. So when we think about action, we should only think about what are we using this action to respond to. If somebody's talking to us and someone's asking a question, how do we answer the question? If we're engaging in some kind of conversation with a group of people, we're listening to the group conversation, and then at the right moment we're adding something to that group conversation. Or if let's say you're applying for a job, right? Whenever you're applying for a job, as everybody knows, you're also applying depending on what is the current economic climate, what's the current hiring market, what kind of jobs are people looking to hire for right now. If you try to apply for a job that's not really in demand, well, even if you're really good at that job, you might not be able to get a job like that. So with everything we do, we need to consider the context before we insert the action, because our actions are always responses. They're only responses to what's going on around us, and what's going on around us will be the thing that essentially either validates or invalidates that action. Doing nothing is not the same thing as an action. So far we've been watching this video, and you might be thinking, wow, it's gonna be so hard to scroll through Instagram and watch Netflix. How hard is it to do nothing? That's not what I'm saying at all. That is doing something. That is filling your mind with distractions. So when we talk about doing nothing, what we mean here is the lack of a response, the lack of a reaction, as you might know from Stoicism. So let's say there's somebody and, they're really getting in your face. They're insulting you. They might be giving you personal insults to your friends or your family even. And when they say it, you get so mad, right? You want, this person, what are they saying to me? They can't say that. I need to respond, right? So that is difficult. It's easy to kind of be triggered, to get riled up and think that you have to do something. And what's hard to do is just to stop and just wait and sit with the emotion, to sit with the anger, to not react to the anger, and just to let it be. And not a lot of people can do that. And if you think about, say, the repercussions, this is where we get the idea of impulsiveness. So what is impulsiveness? Impulsiveness is you felt some emotion and you had to react right now. There wasn't any thought. There wasn't a moment of silence or pause before you took the action. There just was, here's the feeling and here's the action right next to each other. Bam. And that's how you get impulsiveness. So how do you stop impulsiveness? All you have to do is just the time between the thought and the action, just extend it. And as you extend it, as you do this, you have this gap here where you're not doing anything between your feeling and your action. You might realize that as it comes time to take that action, you might start thinking, maybe that's not the right action. So therefore you end up not doing anything. And in this case, how many times has someone gotten in big trouble by doing something impulsive? Whether maybe it had something to do in a romantic front, they got with someone they shouldn't have gotten with, or maybe they spoke their mind too quickly to someone who angered them. It's very difficult. It's simple. It's simple to describe it. Just don't do anything. But you'll see the problem is it's the emotions are turning. The emotions are turning, and every time those emotions are turning, the motivation, is there that you want to react to it. And this essentially is the idea of Stoicism is to not react, whether there's the anger or the pain or the guilt or the shame, whatever feeling it might be, just taking a moment, taking a pause, and then asking, what if I did nothing? And that is why doing nothing is not the same thing as inaction. Why is it so hard to do nothing? Now, the answer to this question has to do with the ego, and it has to do with attachment. Now, there are certain outcomes that we want to occur, and there are certain other outcomes that we don't want to occur. So, for example, let's say that you were applying for a job. So you applied for this job, you did an interview, and now you're attached to the outcome. You're attached to getting that acceptance letter. So what do? You keep checking your email, refresh. Even though this is a fruitless action, since you're so attached to the outcome, you feel that you have to be part of it. You feel that you have to do something because you're attached to the result. But even though you're refreshing that email, it's not causing the result to be any different. Similarly, let's say you had a breakup, right? So you had a breakup with this person, and now you think, well, I don't want to not be with this person. You're attached to the outcome. So what do? Everything that you do is like trying to pull them back. I'm going to convince them. I'm going to send them long texts. I'm going to pour out my feelings. But as you're doing all these things, it's not actually making it any better. It's actually making it worse. And actually, the best thing you could have done is to do nothing. And, to do nothing and just give it breathing room. And maybe there would be a different outcome. Or maybe that breakup would continue. But that's the thing, is you cannot differentiate the two because you are attached. And when you're attached, you feel that you have to do something. And here's the other part, is the ego's going to creep in, and ego's creeping in, and it's saying, you could change that person's mind. You could change the mind of the person who interviewed you if you just send that follow-up email, if you just send that thank you letter, if I just follow the steps. My actions matter, therefore I'm going to get this job. Or, maybe in that relationship, your ego is trying to convince you, oh, well, I have the power to change their mind because I'm great, because I'm so convincing, or whatever it might be. But, there could be other reasons. There could be things bigger than you. And it's hard to step away from the ego. It's hard to step away and be like, well, maybe I don't have any power in this situation. Or maybe if I try to do something, it's not actually going to alter the course. And as if we can detach from the outcomes, we can look at them more objectively, and then we could see where our actions matter or where our actions don't matter. And it's not very easy to practice, non-attachment. It's a whole religion, Buddhism, right? So that is why it's so hard to do nothing. How do we know which actions we should take? So the way to find out if an action is going to bear fruit or not is to be able to map each action up to a cohesive strategy. Now, the problem with that is that most people don't really know what their strategy is. What's the long-term plan? And what kind of goals do they have? And how do these goals align in the same direction instead of just aligning in various directions? Because often one kind of goal could be kind of contradictory to another kind of goal. So, for example, let's say you have a learning goal, and that might require you to sit down and read a book by yourself. But if you do that, well, it's going to contradict, say, your social goal. And your social goal could be, well, I got to meet a lot of people. It's hard to meet a lot of people while you're reading a book by yourself, right? And not every productive task is going to help if it's not aligned with what you actually want. So the hard part is being able to define a strategy and to understand what is the essence of that strategy. And we'll talk a lot more about strategy later on. There's some pretty good books about that. But in essence, you kind of have to know which direction you're headed in, and then start mapping those actions to the direction that you're headed in. And then the second thing that you want to avoid is you don't want to just take random actions that are in kind of haphazard directions. So if you're pretty much doing everything, if you're saying yes to everything, then it kind of produces like a fog, like a noise, because all these actions, they're just kind of going in different directions, and there's not really a vector involved, right? Now, one more thing I can talk about, which is there's a nice little trick, and we mentioned this in the previous video, The Power of Time, and we said, well, if you have empty space, you could fill that empty space by, taking on a new hobby, or, working on a project, or, something that you've kind of set aside that you haven't really been able to get to. And so let's say you have this empty time, and I don't know, let's say you have we could even make it a little bit shorter. Let's say you have like an hour and a half. Well, that's enough time to go to the gym, right? You might feel tempted, oh, I want to go and watch TV, or I want to scroll through Instagram mindlessly for an hour and a half, but it's not really going to do anything, right? So if you can kind of take these blocks of time, whether it's a small block of time, like an hour and a half, and you effectively map being able to go to the gym, or even if you have a longer block of time, let's say you had, a Sunday, well, as I do when I make these videos, right? And being able to kind of go in those empty spaces and then just fill it with a productive task. And by filling it with productive tasks, you could also say, this is space for you to be able to either do something that's based with maintenance, because everybody has to go to the gym, right? Or everyone has to do fitness. Or you could fill it with experiments. So, whether it's like reading a new book or trying a new hobby. Now, all in all, the idea of like which actions to take, it's a whole philosophy, right? Who could really answer that? That's a difficult question to answer. Like, what should I do? It's an age-old question. I'm not even claiming at all that I've even scratched the surface of this topic. But I think it helps to, even just to name it. Just to name it and say, hey, you know what? What actions am I taking? And do I have to take all these actions? Am I just kind of mindlessly, moving around? And I think at the end of the day, your actions do matter. I think I've said a lot here about actions not mattering, but I think your actions do matter. But try to stop and think about, where do my actions matter the most, and which actions do I think that matter that don't really matter? And yeah, that's all I have to say about the topic. See you next time.